Welcome to this demo on Exploring Deployment Manager. This is Doug Renstrom. Deployment Manager provides a reproducible coordination of infrastructure deployment on Google Cloud Platform. In this demo, we will review some simple Deployment Manager examples, use Deployment Manager to create infrastructure, manage deployed infrastructure, and delete deployments. Deployment Manager supports the idea of configuration as code or reproducible infrastructure provisioning. In the cloud, you don't want to nurse infrastructure, but to be able to delete infrastructure and spin it up again, you'll need a way of guaranteeing a reproducible set of machines, networks, and code. You can use simple shell scripts to provision your infrastructure. However, for real-world production scenarios, there are complex requirements that make scripting difficult. For example, it might be useful to have templates that enable you to pass in variables to customize resource provisioning, like creating a set of compute engine resources in different regions to support different territories. Or you may want to coordinate multiple resources, like capturing the IP address of a Cloud SQL instance so it can be passed to compute engine metadata. There are lots of products in this space. Chef, Puppet, Ansible, and Terraform are examples. However, Deployment Manager is the native product from Google that allows you to perform infrastructure as code-based resource provisioning on GCP. Deployment Manager supports a wide variety of GCP resources, including Compute Engine, Container Engine, App Engine, Cloud Functions, PubSub, and more. It supports simple configuration using YAML files and more complex templates via Python code and Jinja templates. Let's review a simple Deployment Manager configuration file, then deploy the resources described in the configuration. From the Google Cloud Platform Management Console, let's go into the Deployment Manager service. Also notice at this point we have no current deployments. Now let's do a deployment. To do this, we'll open Google Cloud Shell. A simple Deployment Manager template has already been created for us. Let's clone the Git repository that contains that template. Now we'll cd into the folder that contains our template. Let's take a look at it. The template is just a text file in YAML format. We're going to configure a set of resources. This is going to be the name of our template. We want to configure a virtual machine, so the type is compute instance. These are the properties of that virtual machine. So for example, we're going to create our virtual machine in US Central 1A. The machine type is just N1 standard 1, and we're going to create a Debian machine. The machine needs a network interface. That's configured down here. Now let's deploy the environment. This command does the deployment. Notice it's gcloud deployment manager, deployments create. The name of our deployment is my deployment, and its configuration is that YAML file we were just looking at a moment ago. Let's try it out. It'll take a minute for the deployment to be ready. While we're waiting, let's go back to Google Cloud Platform Manager. Let's refresh the Deployment Manager page. Notice now we have one deployment that's starting up. It appears the deployment is ready. Let's select that. Here's an overview of our deployment. We've deployed a virtual machine. Let's click on that. Notice it's a compute engine instance. We can go here to manage resource. That'll take us right into compute engine under instances. This would give us information about that instance. We could even SSH into the instance now. Now let's see how easy it is to remove the deployment. Going back to Google Cloud Shell, let's enter the following command. Notice the command is gcloud deployment manager deployments delete, and we're going to delete the deployment we just created. While we're waiting, again, let's go back to the management console. Notice under Compute Engine Virtual Machines, this machine is being stopped. And if we go back to the Deployment Manager service, we'll see this deployment is being deleted. Now let's look at a slightly more complex example. Deployment Manager allows you to create dynamic templates that combine Deployment Manager YAML files with Python code and Jinja templates. These templates work like functions. You can pass arguments to them, and they will prepare a resource based on the parameters. Let's return to Cloud Shell and see how it works. As before, some demo files have been created for us. Let's cd into the folder that contains our files. First, let's look at the YAML file. Notice the YAML file now looks simpler, but it refers to this file, which is our Python file. Now let's look at the Python file. Notice the Python file defines a number of different parameters that can be passed into the template. Finally, there's a schema file. Let's take a look at it. Notice in the schema file, we're setting the properties dynamically, so we can specify the zone we want and also the startup script that we want to run. Let's run this deployment. This command is just like the prior command, gcloud deployment manager deployments. We're going to create our second deployment, and we're going to use our configuration file, vm.yaml. As before, that's going to take a couple minutes to start. Let's return to Deployment Manager. We'll click refresh. Our deployment is complete. Let's take a look at it. Again, there's an overview of what happened. We've deployed a virtual machine. This virtual machine ran a startup script. That was one of the parameters that we had passed. Let's take a look at that virtual machine. Click on Manage Resource. That takes us into VM instances. Since our startup script deployed a web server, let's see if it worked. Excellent. Thanks for watching this demo on Google Cloud Deployment Manager. In this demo, we reviewed some simple Deployment Manager examples. We used Deployment Manager to create infrastructure. We saw how to manage deployed infrastructure, and we saw how to delete deployments. This is Doug Renstrom.